Hi, everybody. Cheyenne Jenvey here again, the Dragonfly, reading from my book, Dragonflies and Demons. First, I want to always read off the safe space comments that I put in the chat. Welcome to my podcast, Dragonfly Discussions. You are welcome to enter your name and location of where you're from. I am thrilled you are listening and hope you enjoy this session together. Also, a safe space reminder, please use your own safe space parameters amongst the chapters I read, which may arouse emotions or memories of your own. You're welcome to excuse yourself or stay. And I have to admit that what I'm going to read today is even difficult for me to reread and relive. So it's pretty much therapy every time I go through this book. So we are in chapter 3. We are on page 94. And the subchapter is My Friend Miss Needle. And the reason why that is the subchapter is because my drug addiction, if you haven't been following, I've been through a really bad drug addiction. It started with marijuana, it went to crank and then methamphetamines, and then it went into liquid snorting black tar heroin. So now my drug addiction is exposed. My family's aware. They're sending me to NAAA, and I didn't have quite the best experience at NAAA because I was 13 stepped. And I'm not going to go into all of that. But basically, trying to stay sober as best as I can, but I'm really hooked on heroin. So here we go. And here we go. So I was allowed to stay at the condo. And what I mean by the condo is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, fireplace, backyard, beautiful kitchen with a bar, like in looking into, like it was bar seating and it was open. My parents were paying for it pretty much, as long as I got good grades and did well. So I was hiding my drug addiction to some degree. They are now aware, but I was living in this really nice condominium just on the other side of Shaw. It's the Woodward Apartments. They're really nice. And so that's where I'm at when I say the condo. So I was allowed to stay. So my parents knew my drug addiction and they allowed me to still stay at this place. Yeah. While trying to stay sober. So I convinced them, like I said, to let me stay. But I was alone. So I was really alone. This was also a time where one of my best friends, Brett, and we were also exposed. He was the one that exposed me to heroin. And now they're on to us. His parents are on to him. My parents are on to me. They're on to us. So I was pretty much alone. And then I also lived alone. My roommates, nobody wanted to live with me because I was a partier. Look at what I'm doing. So I had this 3-bedroom apartment. One was an art studio. I had all my art. I had an art desk, and I would paint and I would draw and I would do a lot of things as much as I could. I really did try to divert my attention from my addiction. And then another room was diverted, I think, to the cats. I'm not quite sure, but it was just kind of like a random room. And then I had the main bathroom and then my own private bathroom. But I didn't have a roommate for a long time. And I lived there for about 2 years on my own. So my parents were still busy with their jobs. So my dad and the restaurant had started to fail. So my parents had opened up a restaurant here in Fresno, a sandwich shop. It was failing a lot because of me. I will take complete responsibility of that. I worked at the restaurant. I was a horrible employee. I was addicted to my drugs, and I was horrible to people. And I know that restaurant filled a lot because of me, and I own that. I own that. Um, so my parents were away a lot. Like my stepmom, she was in this high powered position at this computer operating plant. Like they were data processors and programmers, and they operated all the behind the scenes of your banks and your ATMs and your transactions and stores, and like a lot of big money behind the scenes. I didn't even know it existed, but they were the computer geeks of that world, and it still exists. Um, so they were busy. Stepmom was traveling a lot, not really home a lot. Dad was busy with the restaurant, not really focusing on me. But people were starting to notice a little bit about what was going on. And the restaurant was starting to fail. So my sister, who was a big old hippie, my stepsister, she was a big old hippie. She had stopped following the Grateful Dead, and she had settled on the East Coast in South Carolina. My sister was somewhere on the East Coast while my brother had settled down with his wife and daughter. So my stepbrother also decided to get married and settle down with a woman and have children. He was a big, I'm not, well, whatever. Not going to speak on him. um, so I was never going to get my friend Brent back. And I barely had any female friends. So I'd lost my best friend Brent, who was my drug buddy, to heroin. And now I didn't have any female friends. So I was really, really alone. It was really a scary time for me. My parents had assigned me to an outpatient drug program that was not too far from my condo, so I could like walk there. Actually, it's kind of funny. I live not too far from the rehab that I was sent to, the outpatient. I go just past it on my way to the supermarket, and I'm reminded, but it's okay. I'm okay. But it's just interesting how life will take you full circle to where you were, to right to where you are now, and help you deal with it. It's gnarly. It's just gnarly. It's gnarly to me how I'm also right down the street from where me and my dad, um, it was just me and him between the years of 3 to 5, and we danced in this apartment. And so I go by it all the time. So there's good memories. There's good memories and bad memories. I mean, there was bad memories over by my Ashland apartment. I mean, I have I have history in Fresno. I know this town like the back of my hand. So it's quite interesting because they say in rehab you can't go back to the place where you used to use drugs. You'll never survive, you'll never succeed, you'll never be sober. Well, I'm a true testament against that because I'm here and I see all of where I was at, and I'm okay and I'm sober. So um, that statement is not true. Let's get back to reading. Sorry, I get sidetracked. That's what's so fun about podcasting, right, Rhonda? If you're watching, we babble. Okay. So, okay. Oh my gosh. So my parents, okay, so I didn't really have a vehicle. So my parents allowed me to buy or bought me an electric scooter that you charged up, and it would take you only so many miles, and it only went like 30 miles at max. And so they put me on that and allowed me, they thought that that would deter me to get to drugs. um, so Oh my God, I laugh. One day, I will never forget, was when I took my electric scooter and drove it for miles over to the west side of Fresno looking for a fix of heroin. Okay, that's a loaded sentence right there. I lived over by Fresno State. And I went way over to the southwest side, which is miles. Like, I would say it would be a good 10, 15 miles. And these scooters back then, I mean, they were cool and all, but they charged for only like 3 or 4 hours, and then you were done, and then you needed an outlet to charge it, like a house or something to charge it. It wasn't like you had these electric stations that we have now. We didn't have any of that back then. So I took this sucker on the highway. I took this sucker on the highway because I'm like, I'm not going through all the streets and everything. I'm just going to take it on the highway because that's what I know. Dude, I was honked at. People yelled at me. The cops never pulled me over, but like, oh my God. I was one of those. Yes. Okay. So I drove miles to the west side of Fresno on my electric scooter. I went into the alleys like Brent had shown me and found the same drug dealers he had introduced me to back then. So I watched as Brent and I would go into the west side because he hooked up with these people in the first place. And he and I would ride together, and he was like, I don't want to show you, but he eventually showed me. And so he taught me and who to connect with and how to do whatever in the alleys and what to put the money through the fence and the hole to look for. I mean, it was so sketchy. So he showed me all of that. So I was like learning. I didn't even think I would be on my own, but I was technically learning, really. I was observing. I'm still observant. So I went into the alleys. Okay, and he introduced me back then. I managed to score heroin. So he showed me all of this stuff. So then now I'm on my own using the same techniques because we're separated, right? So we're separated, and so I'm dying for heroin. So I'm using the same things like that he used to go after. And so I'm like, let me just try it on my own. Let me just see. And I risked so much, like stupid. And so I went over there to the west side and I met the same people, and they hooked me up with drugs, and I gave them the money because they saw a rich girl because I had money, and that's all they saw. That's all they saw. So I was able to get through, and I was able to get through a lot. Yeah. Anyways, so I managed to score heroin for the first time on my own. So that's what I'm talking about. I was able to score on the first time on my own, which was big, right? You don't want to be dependent on somebody else. If you're a drug addict, you want to just do it on your own. Then I came home to my condo to get high all by myself. So I got myself back. Somehow I must have charged that electric scooter, or maybe I hitched a ride. I probably hitched a ride. Most likely I hitched a ride. And so I hitched a ride probably back home, and then I got high at the condo. All by myself. I continued to ride my scooter from then onwards until one day I sold it for drugs. Yep, that's what happens. That's what happens when you are a serious drug addict and there's nothing else important but the drugs. You will sell everything important to you. Everything and everyone. Yep. So I sold my scooter. Yeah, my parents weren't very happy about that. I think I sold it to a pawn shop. Actually, I think at first I gave it up to a pawn shop, and I racketeered it not racketeered, but shifted back and forth with paying it and then getting it out and that whole nonsense. And then I finally just sold it. Soon after that, I got a brand new Ford Ranger pickup. Somehow I was able to literally walk into a car lot that day and drive away with a new car. It was quite unbelievable, but it made me feel powerful, like I was free again. I had a car and I could do anything now. So that was a trip. That was unbelievable. I did not have the best credit. I had terrible credit. I couldn't even believe. Like, there were lots that were going on just around Fresno State, and they were hitting up all the young people, and they were hitting up all these young people with endless credit because you were young, you hadn't established any debt really, and so you could just really walk onto the lot and you could just put down your information, and then they would be like, oh, okay, and then you have a job. And I had the backing, and I had the job, and I whatever, I don't even know, but somehow I got a Ford Ranger. It was I can't remember the year because we're talking 2002-ish, but it was, I don't even know. It had been 90 something, but maybe it's 2000. I don't even know. But I had a nice pickup, and they let me just boom, bam, sign everything, and I drove off the lot with a car. I went from a scooter to a car as a drug addict. Whew. Okay. So by this point, I had become very dangerous. My addiction kept growing faster than I could have imagined. And I was still pretending to be sober for my parents. So yeah, I'm coming home and I'm just, oh, everything's hunky-dory. And little did they know. It was quite an interesting thing to witness the devil reach inside me and pull out everything that once made me beautiful just to destroy it. It was, yeah. One afternoon, you'll see. One afternoon, I went to the West Side again and met a heroin drug dealer named Joseph. Joseph was a man who saw a prize in me the minute we met. I let him inside the condo a few times, and it was there behind closed doors of my home that Joseph introduced me to the needle. By now, my addiction had grown into a beast, and I didn't care anymore. We went into the kitchen where he prepared a mixture of cocaine and heroin, slowly showing me how to do it properly because it was a bit dangerous. A bit dangerous? You're pumping drugs into your veins. A bit dangerous. Yes. Then he put the concoction into the syringe. He tied a tourniquet above my elbow using his belt so the veins would pop out all over my arm. He talked me through the whole process about how delicate it was. Then he penetrated the needle into my arm and punctured my vein. He pumped the drug slowly into my veins and filled my bloodstream up with poison. I fell back instantly as the rush took over my entire body. I completely and absolutely loved it. I had just taken my first speedball. So that's what they call a speedball, is heroin and cocaine. And I could sense the devil celebrating that night. I really could. I really knew I had stepped into something really, really bad. This was really serious. But it's amazing that you just push it aside. You just don't look at it. So here you are on page 96, infected. These are the horrors of drug addiction. And if you are an IV drug user, you need to know that you're going to have infections, especially if you live on the streets. It's very important to keep clean. And even the cleanest person can get some stuff. And it's because of the needles. You use dirty needles. You use old needles. You use bad dope. And here you're going to hear some of the horrors of what I went through as a drug addict. And I'm seriously, I will repeat, by the grace of God, I have my hands, I have my arms, I have my feet, I have my face, I have my hair, I have my teeth from how much I used heroin and cocaine. So, this is the subtitle called Infected. I had my first real hospital scare in 2000, the year 2000, a long time ago, 25 years ago, when I shot up in my hand. So I would shoot up in my right hand, which was my writing hand. I'm right-handed, which is crazy. So in 2000, when I would shoot up in my, so I caused an infection to develop under the skin called cellulitis. So cellulitis is when you miss the vein and you pump the drugs now under the skin and you form, I mean, some people do skin popping, which I never got into skin popping, which is also what leads to cellulitis, but it's where you miss the vein and then you accidentally go into the skin and now the drugs are in the skin, which the skin takes obviously a lot slower time to absorb, and then it's very dangerous to do. So, well, IV is dangerous too, but it's all bad. It's just all bad. So my right hand, the one that I write with, became so swollen that I could not use it at all. So I had to be hospitalized. Like literally, it was that bad infected. It was so puffy. It was so swollen. And luckily I had insurance at the time. Most people don't. And they usually end up losing their hand. The doctors had to cut my hand open. Yes, they did. They had to cut the whole top of my hand open and clean out the infection thoroughly. I was placed on strong antibiotics after that. For the subsequent 3 days, I prayed for God to not take my hand. I survived only to keep using it on the same hand as well as all over my body. So after I got sober and everything was all hunky-dory, I'm like, oh, I'll go back to that hand because it had good veins. Subtitle, Colliding with My Demons. It's astounding how fast things spiraled down for me in 2001. If we all remember 2001 and all the things that happened in 2001, let's go there. I couldn't have had more of a downward spiral, but I was still fooling everyone that I had everything under control. September 11th, 9/11. So 9/11, 2001. That's why I mean this was a very important day. Was a day that I don't think any American will ever forget. As people were dying, I was doing things. As the second plane was crashing into the Twin Towers, I was gearing up to get more drugs. After kissing my cats goodbye, because I had 2 cats at the time, I had Chester and Smiles. I had a beautiful black cat, and he had a couple spots on his chest and his tummy. And then I had a beautiful desert tabby, Smiles. She was like this desert tan, had the most beautiful markings. She looked like a desert kind of cat. She was really wild. She was so beautiful, so beautiful. And I have pictures of them. Actually, I'm really surprised that I have pictures of them after everything that I had lost through everything. I still have a picture of them too. And if you ever get to see them, they are gorgeous cats. Actually, let me show you them. They are gorgeous. All right, where we were. Okay, after kissing my cats goodbye and leaving my condo, I glanced at the TV to see live footage of smoke billowing out of the Twin Towers. I realized that the United States had just been attacked. As much as that should have fazed me, it did and did not, because I was obsessed with my mission to get drugs and feed my serious addiction. As the Twin Towers were crumbling into pieces quickly, so was my entire life. I was filled with rage, panic, anger, and fear that day. I raced across town at 80 miles per hour over to the west side when I veered off into the other lane and had a head on collision with another car. Excuse me. My truck spun into a circle, tipped over, and then slammed into a telephone pole. Car accident number 3. So if you had been following, or if you listen, I've already been in 2 car accidents. One was my first car that I had gotten when I was 16, trying to get a feather. I just veered off and slammed into, I think, a telephone pole. Jesus, interesting. And then the second accident was in San Luis Obispo, where I was drunk driving and veered off the off ramp at like 60 miles per hour, flew over it, and crashed my car. That was my first jail stay. So this is car accident number 3, which is one of the most major car accidents. The entire cage of the truck collapsed on top of me. It just completely, because I flew in and it just smashed my whole entire left side of my head. And it sliced my head wide open. Yep. I still have a scar right back here. My hair doesn't want to cooperate often because of that scar. So I'm constantly reminded of it. It's a jagged scar. Blood immediately started to pour down my face like a river and all over my clothes. Seriously, I'm like pinned in there and all this blood is draining all over and I have all this liquid all over. It was very scary. Because I was so high on drugs, I didn't feel any pain at the moment. So I didn't feel the fact that my head was just cut open. But I knew that I was hurt badly. I fell out of the truck, stumbled onto the road, and fell right onto the sidewalk, shaking badly and panicking about how much blood there was. So literally, I'm on the other side of the road. I opened up because I thought there was gasoline on me. I don't know. I panicked, and I'm just dazed. And I fell out of the truck, and I managed to get to the other side of the road, and I got onto the sidewalk, and then all these people started coming around me. Traffic stopped, like sirens came, like people came, like, because there was blood. There was so much blood. There was so much blood. Ugh, there was so much blood. Soon, a lot of people started coming to the scene of the accident, including pedestrians, police officers, paramedics, and even firefighters. I was rushed to the hospital immediately while the other driver went to jail. He was under the influence too, and just like that, everything changed for me. So it was very interesting that, because back then they didn't have the laws that they have now. And by the grace of God, I don't even know why after the hospital and I was stapled all back together, why they didn't just ship me back to jail too. Because he wasn't injured apparently. I don't even know how he wasn't injured, but he went straight to jail. I went to the hospital and then I went home. So we were both 2 DUI drivers hit head on, and he went to jail and I went home after a head on collision. But I'm telling you what, that probably would not have happened today. Today, the both of us would probably be in jail, and I would be in that hospital in the jail getting way bad care. So A lot of angels were watching over me and others. Others. Um, okay. Okay. So I was rushed to the hospital immediately while the other driver went to jail. He was under the influence too, and just like that, everything changed for me. When I arrived at the hospital, they quickly started tending to my head injury. My father arrived and turned white as a ghost when he saw me. So he saw how bad my head was cut open. My it was it was cut all the way to like my scalp, my brain. Like he sat ever so patiently by my side as the team of doctors and nurses began to wash my skull. So it was all the way to my skull. Sorry, not my brain, but my skull. That's pretty deep. Dagnabbit. Okay. Okay. Staple my scalp back together. I remember everyone talking about how they could see my actual skull and how fortunate I was. I was so high that the reality of the seriousness hadn't quite sunken in yet. The doctors and nurses stapled my head with 13 staples. I recall the sound of the hard clamping on my skull by the stapler. I will never forget that moment as my father sat next to me while staple after staple was inserted into my head. It was like slow motion. He told me that day, sitting on the table, that things were going to change forever and that I had some serious thinking to do. So literally they put staples into your head. They it's like a staple gun, and they're literally putting your head back together. So on my left side of my head, there is pieces of my scalp and my hair, and you can't really see it because I cover it. But if you pull it all back, you can see the jagged scar, and you can see, it's a reminder. It is a serious reminder. And every time I blow dry my hair, deal with my hair, it's kind of like my Achilles heel. It just never wants to cooperate. It itches. It bothers me. It is quite interesting to live with this scar in my head. Um, so, so here we are on page 98. I told you this was going to be difficult. So here we are at goodbyes. I was taken to my parents' house where I went through withdrawals from heroin. I had to decide which long-term drug treatment program I was going to go into. In the weeks after the accident, my parents set up interviews with a couple of drug programs. Delancey Street in San Francisco turned me down, telling my parents, ironically, that I wasn't bad enough and I needed to experience way worse before they would accept me. So, Delancey Street in San Francisco is really for, now that I understand why they rejected me, it's really for those people who have been on the streets a lot longer than I have, who have been in and out of prison, in and out of jail, in and out of incarceration, who have had extensive years out there. And I was too taken care of by my family. I was too pretty girl yet. I hadn't gotten that bad, although I was bad, but I can see why Delancey rejected me. They were like, really? Really? We got way worse waiting, and you're wanting her to come through here? So, and Delancey Street is beautiful. Oh my God. It is an entire block and it is beautiful, spacious living balconies. They even have a restaurant. I suggest you go to the Delancey Street restaurant. They actually have the people who are in the rehab serve you, and they worked up to the level just like I did in my own program, the last one. So they actually work up to that degree, and they actually learn how to work a job, and they learn skills, and they go back to school, and they do all this. But Delancey Street, and it's got beautiful ocean view seating. They have a patio, and it's got great food. So Delancey Street, I'm telling you, go to Delancey Street restaurant in San Francisco. You will not be disappointed. Oh, I was so excited about that place. Like, I was like, yes, let me go in there because I want to work at a restaurant and I want to do all the things. They have housekeeping. All the people give back. All the students, like they give back into the program. Like, it's really amazing, and they learn skills. Like it's an amazing program. Check out Delancey Street. But I got turned down. Anyways, I wasn't bad enough. I needed to experience my worst ways before they would accept me. I recovered within a couple of weeks after the accident and decided to go to a program called Teen Challenge in Bakersfield, California. So Teen Challenge is a really good program. It's a men and women's program. It's a Christian-based program. Don't quote me. I haven't looked recently if Teen Challenge still exists. I know the program I went into doesn't exist here in Fresno either, which is really disappointing. So, but Teen Challenge is one of the most successful programs that have gone around here in the Central Valley. And they were in Bakersfield, California at the time when my parents tried to get me in there. My parents found it and felt that it was my best and only option if I were to beat my drug addiction for good. It was a Christian-based, long-term, and far enough away from Fresno where all my demons resided. So everybody believed you got to get away from your familiarities. You got to get away from your town. You got to get away from your drug addiction. You got to get away from all of your connections, all your friends, all your people. You got to get all the way out and have some time separation and then maybe come back. But that was the theory, right? Which is a good theory. I support it completely. So I agreed and went with my parents to the program, which was almost 2 hours away, which it's funny because I'm like, Fresno to Bakersfield, that's 2 hours away. I'm like, that's nothing now. I'm like, that's nothing. But it was like 2 hours away. Because my mindset was, oh, I'm going to be 2.5 hours away from my drug addict friends. And, my mentality was so sick. So 2 hours away, albeit reluctantly. So I was very reluctant to go to this rehab, but I was doing it for my parents. I wasn't really ready to quit drugs, but I was trying to convince my parents that I was. I knew I could never return to the condo otherwise. So I was doing it all so I could get everything back. Because they promised me if I do this rehab, I could get my cats back, my apartment back, I could get everything back. I knew I could never return to the condo otherwise. In the long car ride while on our way to the program, my parents laid out the new rules for me. They told me that I had to stay in this program and that if I left, there was no returning to the condo, the family, and my neighborhood. So they kind of switched it up on me last minute. I'm not kidding. They switched it up on me. I was prepared for this. They said that if I did come around, they would call the police immediately. They also told me that my cats would be given over to Cat House on the Kings if I did not stay, which Cat House on the Kings still exists. And they house a bunch of cats. It's a no-kill shelter. If you ever want to drop your cats, if you're not able to take them or house them or move them or relocate them or keep them for any other reason, cat house on the Kings will take them, and it's a beautiful yard out in the country, and the cats get to kind of roam free, and they have indoor and outdoor spaces, and so check it out. That's where my cats ended up going. And I hope they had a good life. They were very serious, and as much as it was hard for them to tell me that, I knew that if I left them, I knew I had left them with no choice. So I had left my parents with no choice, basically. I was that bad. So, in the days before the final day to leave for the drug treatment, my parents took me to the condo to pack up my important belongings and say goodbye to say goodbye to my first animal children. So Smiles and Chester were my first cats that I had ever really had on my own. The other cats I had had as a child with my family, but these were the first two children, kitties, that I had ever had on my own. So it was really hard, but the drug addiction was more important. And I'll always live with that. Chester and Smiles were my kitties. I trusted my parents to take good care of them. On the day I left for drug treatment, I remember saying goodbye to my older brother, which is my stepbrother, and at the Harrison house as we stood in the driveway. So the Harrison house, for those who aren't familiar, the Harrison house is a house that I grew up in. It was the final house that I remember as a young adult, young adult, before we moved out and my family completely changed. So the Harrison house was a big, important part of my life for a long time here in Fresno. He looked at me and told me very seriously, "You have to make it, Shy." And I don't like the nickname Shy, but my stepfamily only used to call me Shy. And it's just an abbreviation of Cheyenne, Shy. I don't like it, so don't call me Shy. Cheyenne. He hugged me. I will never forget the naked fear in his eyes, like he was truly scared for me for the first time in his life. My stepbrother didn't understand drugs or why some people couldn't stay away from them. He never had used drugs in his life, so he took it really hard. I hugged him back just as tight, promising him that I'll make it. So my stepbrother really didn't understand drug addiction, although he had an alcoholic natural father. So it was me and my dad, and then it was my stepmom and her children, stepbrother, stepsister. So I had a stepbrother, stepsister who they had an alcoholic father. So I had a drug addict mom. They had an alcoholic father. Their mom and my dad married, and so we became a family. So it was interesting that he couldn't understand a drug addiction, but yet I guess maybe he couldn't probably understand his father's alcoholism, probably, and he probably still can't. That's interesting. That's interesting. That's probably why, yeah, that's a huge reason why he couldn't understand. See how you reveal things and you understand things as you read through things again? It's quite awesome. Okay. So where are we? Okay, so Teen Challenge, subchapter Teen Challenge, page 99. 745. All right. When we arrived at Teen Challenge, I started to get nervous. I didn't want them to leave me there. My stepmom and dad. Real dad. I didn't want to stay or to quit drugs. However, my parents were so serious that they even took my 2 suitcases to make it harder for me to leave. They figured that if they took my suitcases, perhaps I wouldn't leave. Oh, really? Finally, I had to say goodbye and watch them leave. Then I went inside to begin my new life in this ugly program. To me, it was ugly. I remember all the girls who stared at me After just 48 hours, I asked for the largest cardboard box they had and began to pack my things. I was leaving. Oh my God. I was such, God, I was so addicted. I was just so addicted. I was so just brainwashed by heroin and that drug. And there was just nothing that would stop me from getting back to it. Like, how insane. How insane. You're all the way in Bakersfield. Your parents take your suitcases and you are ready to leave no matter what. My parents had put a small amount of money on my books, and I used it to get a bus ticket back to Fresno, back to my demons. So they left like, I don't know, 150 bucks. I don't know, 150 bucks. I think the bus ticket back was like 75. When I got back, I was so lonely. I really was. I remember coming back into Fresno and I'm like, holy shit, what did you just do? You know, you can't go back home. You know, you just really messed up. Really, really messed up. But you made your decision. You might as well go for it. You might as go get high. Like, go get high. So back to my demons. When I got back, I was so lonely and scared in the city that used to be my hometown. So here I was in my own hometown that felt so strange now. It really was eerie. It was so weird. But had quickly become my prison. So here I am back, addicted. All I have is this addiction. That's all I have. My hometown is now turned into my hell. My hell. I knew that I couldn't go near my family again and didn't want to for fear of being arrested. I took them very seriously, and so I began to live life on the streets. I carried my cardboard box everywhere. So what I did was I found the biggest box at that rehab and I literally packed everything in it, and it was a big box. And I shuffled it onto the bus. I shuffled it off to the bus. I left it at the bus station. I then asked how long I could leave it at the bus station. I then got high, stayed somewhere, went back to the box, figured out some probably help to get that box moved to my next location, and then stayed at that location and kept my belongings as safe as I could. And it was not fun. It was not fun. So I carried my cardboard box everywhere as I bounced around from place to place. Sometimes I had to leave it, but I always returned to it because I held everything dear to me. Everything that was, well, not really dear, because my cats, I left my cats. I mean, not really dear. Wasn't really dear to me. Oh, crazy. All of the things that were important to me were in that box. Obviously not. Told you this was difficult. Okay, so we are. Okay, I'm going to finish. We have a while, but that's okay. I'm going to finish. When will it end? Page 100. Soon after coming back home, one of my best friends from high school was killed. It was in October of 2001. It was in October of 2001. Her boyfriend at the time pushed her down a flight of stairs during a rage-filled fight. She fell and broke her neck, which killed her instantly. So this is my friend Jen. Jen was a beautiful young woman. She had a boyfriend who was dealing drugs at the time, and he was a violent kind of man, and she was a beautiful, beautiful girl. And she had a daughter at the time, and they got in a horrible fight, and they lived upstairs in the upstairs apartment, and there was like the stairwell just outside their door. And so they got in a fight up at the top of the landing at the apartment. And then somehow he pushed her and she fell down the stairs and broke her neck at the bottom of the stairs. And he was sent to prison. He wasn't sent for life, which he should have. He was sent for 20, 30 years. And then he was released. He's released now. So that's the... Sorry. So that's the story of Jennifer. She was one of my best friends. Hang on just one second. All right. So sorry. So sorry. Told you this is difficult. All right. So here I am in my drug addiction, and I'm out of contact with a lot of people. So the only way I found out was because my dad still had contact with me. And so he told me what had happened to Jennifer. So I still had a little bit of contact with my father via phone, which was how I learned about her death. I wasn't allowed to attend the funeral because I was a drug addict and I was exiled from so many people's lives. So I couldn't attend her funeral. It broke my heart and I cried for days afterward. Grief and guilt consumed me. It didn't take long for me to figure out how to survive on the streets. My childhood training days with Debbie, so Debbie is my birth mom. So all the stuff that she showed me came rushing back as my survival mechanism. on how to cope, which wasn't the healthiest. So, my childhood training days with Debbie, my original birth mom, came back to me, and I figured out how to make it like a drug addict on the streets pretty fast. It's not every day that a girl wakes up this is really hard. It's not every day that a girl wakes up and decides to consider her body as a tool, but when you have a drug addiction to feed, it quickly becomes a source of income. I hadn't realized it at first, but it became apparent to me how powerful my body was. I began I began to entertain thoughts of prostitution, but I knew it was dangerous. You could get picked up by an undercover cop, raped, or killed. I was all alone on the streets when I went over to Belmont Avenue and took my first steps as a prostitute. Flashbacks of the zoo moment rushed into my mind. And what I mean by the zoo moment was when I was 13 years old. This is now when I'm like 22, 23, 24 ish. So when I'm 13 years old, maybe 10 years prior, my my birth mom would take me to the zoo, and she got drunk, and I had to drive us down Belmont to get safely to our house, her house. So here I was back on the same street in Belmont, 10 years later as an adult, prostituting herself for drugs. I was reminded of how, as a little girl, only 13 years old, I had to drive drunk Debbie home on the same street. What had I turned myself into? It was easy for me, though, to get men. I always kept my hair and makeup done and stayed clean in public showers or at people's houses. My first client paid me a lot of money, and I saw how fast the cash could come in. Then I had my second client who took me on a ride that made me think twice about working on the streets. And I'm not kidding. Ladies, you need to be careful. Anyone, trans, homosexuals, anyone working the streets, you need to be careful. This was back in the early 2000s. It has gotten 10 times worse. Of kidnapping, rape, um, sex trades, everything. So my first client paid me a lot of money, and I saw how fast the cash could come in. Then I had my second client who took me on a ride. The client was a smooth talker. He promised me a lot of money. I eagerly agreed, not knowing how the events of the night would turn out. He drove me into the countryside, where we went down a long dirt road in the middle of grape vineyards to a house that was tucked way far in the back. I remember feeling extremely uneasy as I was all alone and in a place where even my loudest screams would go unheard. Then the client asked me if I was ready. He reminded me of how much money I was going to make. I told him yes. We walked into the house where I saw several men hanging out, drinking and laughing. They all smiled at me as I was led to a bedroom in the back of the house. There was nothing in the room except for a mattress, a desk, and a chair. Then he told me to undress and put on the robe, which was draped over the chair. I instantly knew what I had gotten myself into, and was also aware that I had no way to escape. All I could think of was the large amount of money I was going to make at the end of the night, and consequently get high again. Then I waited for the first guy to enter the room. As they entered the room one by one to have their way with my body, I just prayed for it to end. Finally, the last one was finished and he told me to get dressed. Sore and uncomfortable, I redressed myself and used the bathroom. I wiped the tears from my cheeks and cleaned myself up as best as possible. The reality of what just happened was slowly flooding my mind. All I could think about was getting high so I could erase it all. Basically, I had been gang raped, if one wants to constitute it as that. But pretty much that's what happened. Then I was taken back to town in a car and dropped off on the streets. The client gave me a large envelope of cash and thanked me for a good time. I did make a lot of money, but it was pretty awful to endure. As he drove away, I walked over to a bench at the bus stop and called my drug dealer hastily. Being ever so faithful to me, he arrived in the next 20 minutes. I purchased a large amount of heroin and cocaine. After sticking a syringe full into my arm in a bathroom, I slipped into happy oblivion quickly. So that's basically what my life was shooting up drugs in bathrooms, dirty bathrooms, prostitute on Belmont in Fresno. That's what my life was 20 years ago. Like, it's just, it's insane. It's just insane. But that's the power of what God and yourself and miracles. And if you just try and stay sober and go after what you know you're destined to be, like, you don't have to be a drug addict. You don't have to go down that road. You don't have to accept it. There's tragic things that have happened to you, but you don't have to be that victim. You don't have to fall into all of that. Like, yes, it's there. It's always there. But, what's really rewarding is staying sober and working towards something and helping others and doing good things and sharing your testimony, because you're not alone. I know I'm not alone. I know there's a lot of people out there who've been in these shoes. And so it's vulnerable to share this crap. But I need to do it. I need to do it, and I did it, and I'm sharing it. So here we are. And here we are together. So thank you for being with me. All right. Okay, so I got high to erase all that crap, right? So though that experience, as horrible as it was, didn't stop me from doing what I was doing, I did promise myself that day to find another way to never walk the streets again. So I called my first client, and with his help, I was able to get high dollar clients that kept me off the streets. I convinced myself that I was a high paid escort. I had acquired a cell phone. So I had a cell phone. I was no longer using payphones. Back then, you were still using payphones. If you could afford a cell phone, that was a privilege, but it was expensive. So I was now able to afford a cell phone because I was a prostitute. Woohoo! That's something to be proud of. All right. Okay. So I had a cell phone and was starting to form a steady client base that continued to feed my drug habit. I would stay at NA, AA, people's houses, hotels, or cockroach-infested drug dealer houses all at night, all the while still living out of my cardboard box. So I would crash anywhere I could. I had my cardboard box that I had all my belongings in. I carried that around everywhere I could, and that's where I landed, and it was totally humiliating. It was humiliating. Sometimes people would steal from my box while I slept. So, yeah, I would try to fall asleep. Most of the times I would be sleeping with one eye open, but I would sleep with two eyes closed. And the minute I slept with two eyes closed, my stuff was stolen. My stuff was stolen. For months, I continued to struggle and live on the streets in the manor, still somewhat communicating with my father only. So my father somewhat still had communication with me. Everyone else refused to talk to me, but my father always kept a loving olive branch extended out to me. All right. Is this the end? Oh no, we still have a little bit ways to go. All right, if we go to 8:30, just hang on with me. We'll finish by 8:30. Rhonda, you and I are hour and a halfers. Okay, so we are on page 103, beginning of the end. I then started stealing things from stores, only to sell them on the streets for money to buy drugs. I became very good at conning people and kept my appearance up so well that drug dealers would mistake me for being an undercover cop. Yep, I was a great facade. I stuck out like a sore thumb on the west side of town. So here I am on the west side of town. It's pretty much predominantly African American culture, Asian also. A white girl like me does not belong walking on the streets over there. So I was a young girl with shiny hair and a beautiful face, asking from the worst of the worst for some heroin. I would show them my track marks and use the drug right in front of them to prove to them that I was serious. So I would go into these drug houses, I would meet these drug people, and they would be like, You're not real. And I'd be like, No, I am. And I'd show them my tracks. I'd have to some of them would want me to use in front of them. They would make me not leave until I used in front of them. I don't know what kind of game that was, but I did it, and then I left. Only then would they let me go. Like I said, only then would they let me go. I carried my drugs with me all the time, even created a little pouch where I put my drug paraphernalia, like my spoon, fresh cotton, tissue for the blood, a lighter, etc. So you had to have your little drug kit. You had to have your little drug kit of all your little tools or your little shit, your cotton to collect the blood, your tissue, your spoon, all that stuff. I would often find the nearest public bathroom, so not a clean environment, and immediately got high. Heroin makes you look the other way. Yes, it does. No matter how disgusting of an environment you are in at the time. It could be the dirtiest of bathrooms, but you'll still go in there and shoot up. Walking out high as a kite. I stayed as high as I could for as long as I could till I would eventually pass out somewhere, hoping it was safe enough to sleep and not be murdered during the night. That was my life. I got my second hospital scare when I had to return for surgery, only that time I had developed an abscess in my arm. So not only did I almost lose my right hand, now I'm about to lose my arm. And I still have a scar. I still have a scar right there. Right there to remind me. I happened to miss a vein and accidentally stuck the needle directly into my skin. So like I was telling you, the skin popping and all that, if you go into the skin, it's very dangerous. You get large infections. That caused a huge infection, which meant the doctors had to cut my arm open. Yeah, they did. They had to cut my arm open to drain and clean it out. It was so huge. Yeah, it was bad. Doctors knew that I was a drug addict, but they were kind enough to tell me to get help. Because I had worked so many jobs from the age of 15 till then, so I had been working from the day of 15. And back then, unemployment was really, really nice. It was really healthy. Unemployment was really healthy. You got a lot more than you get now. And the threshold was a lot high, well, it was different. And you got food assistance, you got cash, you actually had dollars and everything that you were given, like cash. Um, and that's probably why they changed it, because people abused it, just like I did. But it was unemployment that I earned. And so here you're going to learn what I did with that. I'm not proud of it. I don't do it now, of course. That's not what it's meant for. People do abuse it, and I'm not supportive of that. Um, but this is what I did, okay? I had a large unemployment account and some money to live off of. So I had worked enough to have a large unemployment account to draw from. You don't want to pull from your unemployment if you don't have to. You want to just use it in case of an emergency. That's what it's meant for. But my drug addiction was an emergency, so I abused it. So I went downtown to apply for unemployment and food stamps. The government had made it pretty easy for drug addicts to get public aid and financial assistance. It really was very easy back then. My application was approved for almost $400 a week for unemployment and $250 a month for food stamps. That's probably what it is now. I don't know. That was a lot for me. Now that would be pittance because I'm used to making a lot more, twice as that. But that to me was a lot. um, and $250 a month for food stamps. Of course, I'm a drug addict. I'm not eating a whole lot, so my drugs are my food. So that was a lot. But that probably is what it is now. That's so sad. That's so sad. I was able to move into an actual room at a lady's house, which was nice because it was a lot safer and stable than the places I had been staying at. She had a few house rules, of course. I had to be home at a decent time, pay rent on time, and definitely no parties there. So that was also another thing. So I was getting so $1,600 a month, and I was able to afford a room, which a room is like, I think I paid like $450 a month. So I'm doing pretty good on unemployment, is what I'm saying. Like a drug addict, then I don't know, whatever. Sorry. One night I brought Joseph, my faithful drug dealer at the time, to her house. So Joseph was the guy who introduced me to heroin and cocaine, showed me how to shoot up. So he was a bad guy. And here I am inviting him into her house where I'm renting a room from, which is not okay. The next morning I woke up and took a shower. I always slept and showered with my diamond and sapphire rings on my hand because they were so valuable to me that someone would have to kill me to get them. One was from my great grandmother with diamonds and sapphires, while the other was from my mother with a beautiful star sapphire placed in between two tiny diamonds. However, that morning I decided to take them off. I don't know why. And leave them on the dresser while I took a shower. I don't know why. I really don't. Joseph was alone in my bedroom waiting for me till I got out so we could go get money for drugs together. When I got out of the shower, though, Joseph was long gone, and so were my two diamond and sapphire rings. So he robbed me. I immediately crumbled to the floor, repeatedly crying and screaming, "No." I think I cried for months over those rings. I still will cry over those rings. When I told my father, my parents went to every pawn store in town, but it was too late. The rings were gone forever. All because of drugs and awful demons I was constantly fighting. I never saw Joseph after that ever again. I hated what the streets and the world were doing to me. So I kind of replicated my Star Sapphire, and then my stepmom did buy me kind of like a replica of the diamond and sapphire ring, but it's not the same. That's not the same. That was my grandmother's like engagement ring, I think, from my grandfather, the diamond and sapphire. And then the star sapphire was really unique gem from my stepmom. Although I still would have liked that ring, but I found a replica. Um, that was really hard losing those rings. That was really hard. So I was eventually kicked out of the lady's place, and so I went back on the streets. So that lady saw that I was nothing but a drug addict and using her home and bringing in bad people, and so rightfully so, she kicked me out. And so I went back out on the streets with nowhere to go. God, oh my God, I remember the NAAA people helping me move from place to place to place to place. It was so embarrassing. It was so awful. With my box, my cardboard box. Shortly after that, I found myself in an alley trying to score drugs, but I didn't have a clean needle to use. So I asked the drug dealer for his needle. It was an old needle with a little blood on it. I knew never to use a used needle, but I was feeling so sick that I looked past it. A voice from inside me whispered, "Don't use me. I have Hep C." I ignored the voice and just like that inserted the needle into my vein and possibly caught hepatitis C. I knew that I had probably caught something very serious and deadly. However, I couldn't care about that or anything else. All I cared about was not getting heroin sick and getting my next high. That's what drugs will do to you. That's how serious of an addiction will do to you. And I remember that day. I remember that day in the alley, and I remember that voice, and I remember ignoring it, and I remember what came after. So here we are, page 105. We're almost done. I promise you, we're almost done. Another conviction, subchapter, another conviction. On Christmas Day in 2001, so here we are, 2001. So I've been on the streets, I don't know, a year or two. A year or two, I think it's been a year or two since Teen Challenge. No, it's been a year. It's been a full year. Yeah, that's pretty hard. It's not easy living on the streets. Um, on Christmas Day in 2001, after, this is four brutal months on the streets, living with my cardboard box of belongings. It felt longer. I snuck over to my old Harrison house, knowing my family was inside celebrating the holiday together. So I went back over to my childhood home on the Harrison house, knowing my family's all going to be inside, and I just wanted to see them and be with them. I peered through the windows and saw everyone looking so happy and complete, a picture-perfect family. I felt forgotten and abandoned. So that was hard. I remember looking through the windows and seeing them all just doing their normal thing, and I'm not there. Like they should be sitting around feeling sorry, but it just was weird. It was weird to see. But I knew I couldn't see them or go inside. I also was scared that if the neighbors saw me, they would call the cops because all the neighbors were told to call the cops. I wrote a note to my family and quietly tiptoed to the door. I rang the doorbell, dropped the note, and ran away. I was hurting so bad and felt so lost. All I wanted was my family back. In early 2002, I started to steal more from stores, getting arrested from petty theft charges, and then being let go with a slap on the wrist. So I'm still living on the streets, So that's where I say the year, because it was like a year I was living on the streets. Um, I was arrested for having stolen checks on me and was being charged for fraud along with drug possession. So I had stayed the night at this business at the time down in Tower, and they let me sleep on the floor. And I had stayed in that business, and I had snuck around into the drawers, and I found these checks. And back then, you could write checks to stores or anywhere banks. You could write checks to check cashing, like forward advance. They would not have the fast processing like they have now. So it would take them a little while. So you could write a check and you could write it for like $100, $500, and they would give you the cash instantly. And then it was like a day or two before they caught on to it. So I played that fraudulent game, which now you can't get away with that at all. You can't get away with that at all. So, stolen checks on me and was being charged for fraud along with drugs possession. So, they caught me with bad checks and then they caught me with the drugs that were in my purse. And in the ugliest of the jails in Fresno, I was confronted by a grammar school friend who used to have a crush on me and was my first real crush too. He was then a Fresno police officer lecturing me about drugs. I was all torn up with needle marks all over my arms and hands. My face was covered in pimples and scars. I cowered in humiliation while he lectured me, telling me how I was better than all of that and that I needed to stop it. He gave me a figurative kick in the pants that day. However, it didn't sink in much because drugs have a way of keeping you blind so you don't see the truth of your own reality. The reality was staring me in the face from all directions now. So here I am with a grade school friend who's become a cop, who knows me from 8th grade, seeing me in my worst of the worst, behind bars, giving me a lecture, all freaking messed up, and telling me, Cheyenne, you are better than this. You need to get help. And I'm just like so humiliated. That was one of the worst. Oh my God. And people saw me, apparently people saw me out there homeless, begging for change, people who knew me because I worked a lot of jobs. I knew a lot of people, and they would tell my family, hey, I saw Cheyenne out there begging for change. And I didn't know. I didn't recognize anything from Adam. I'm just trying to get the money to score my habit. But apparently a lot of people saw me struggling out there. Yeah. When I was released from jail, I immediately went to the west side again to score heroin. So every time I got out of every time I got out of jail, the first thing I would do would just go get high. Just go get high. Because it was over on the west side anyways. It was close to the west side. Downtown was close to the west side. So I'm like, let me just go back over there. I had to face the law again, but that time I was in serious trouble. I was placed on formal probation with strong stipulations of attending an outpatient drug program and drug testing during probation for a year. So when you drug test, you have to be sober. You can't fake that stuff, right? I had to be clever if I wanted to keep using heroin and beat the law. Here I am, still beating the law. I continued to use drugs and con everyone, from drug dealers to cops and even the judges. I bought fake urine off the streets and inserted it inside of me to pass the court mandated drug tests. Yes. 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 You heard that correctly. I would stuff bottles up inside my vagina and I would then pop it and then out would come clean urine and pass the test. Let's see. I would sober up just enough for the judge and evaded the cops at every corner. My addiction kept growing as I was arrested multiple times for violated probation. Jail taught me how to be tough, and I learned more from the inmates about how to survive on the streets. So I started staying in jail long enough to learn stuff on how to survive on the streets. It wasn't long before I was arrested for drug possession again. I had a large amount of heroin and cocaine on me at the time when I was arrested, and my new charges were much more serious. I was charged with felony drug possession with 2 year sentence in prison and got felony probation for the next 3 years. So we're going to stop there. But I was placed on 3 years probation with drug testing, all this program. I had to show them what I was doing, and all to avoid a 2 year. So I already had a 2 year prison lid over my head now. Okay. So we're going to stop there because it gets worse. It gets a lot worse. And I don't want to continue because it gets a lot worse. But we don't have time, and we're an hour and a half. And I appreciate you all. Thank you very much. This was very emotional for me. We are going to resume on November 4th at 7 p.m. I'm going to have pretty much 7 p.m. readings for the next Tuesdays going forward. So stay tuned, stay plugged in. And again, thank you for being here tonight. And hope you have a wonderful evening, wonderful week. And we'll see you when I see you. Bye.